Dr. Rademaker's prescription for transformation. Let's tap into your own authentic genius and live the life you desire.
You are now listening to
Join Dr. Rademaker for an enlightened conversation about our brain intelligence, our body intelligence, and our energy intelligence. And now, here's your host, Dr. Bart Rademaker.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, prescription for your transformation, real people, real conversations, and real success. And I'm looking side to side on all these screens that I have just to make sure that everything's running. And I just noticed that one of them isn't. But let's see. It's on my own page. It's on YouTube. And then I guess my actual prescription for your transformation page is just going to have to catch up at some point. But anyhow, one of the cool things, too, I realize right now, and I learned this really wonderful idea from my own coach, Chad Cooper. And he says, have a mirror in front of you. Have a mirror on your desk so that you can see you. You can see your own greatness. And that's actually how I start my coaching calls, with many of my clients. It says, what's great about you? What is it that you want to celebrate? Because way too often, we're not in that realm of, looking at ourselves and appreciating the wonderfulness and magnificence of ourselves. This whole concept of being narcissistic, it's totally misunderstood, in fact, because really what narcissism means is the need to get the validation from the external world about yourself. It has nothing to do with you wanting to be the best version of you. And that's one of the big misconceptions that I think is really important. And as I'm looking around, I see that fan behind me. Got to take care of that. So anyhow, what is today all about? Well, it's the work that we're meant to do. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the previous shows that I've had, let me just adjust the fans here because I don't like seeing them. There we go. So with the previous shows, that what I've discussed is, what is your work to do? Learned this, from my coaching over the years. Because, as Byron Katie states to us, right, pain is that signal that instructs us that there's something that we need to explore. Same thing that I've been saying for years. I'm celebrating my faults and weaknesses, just so that I'm aware of what it is that I need to work on. Because as we'll talk about today, because today is an important one, and it's about the violence in our world and what that really means. But I'm going to start off with a framework of what can help us, deal with that problem in this life, whether us being violent or other people being violent or observing violence, however you want to define that. And I think it's really, really important. Because prescription for your transformation, this show is really about tapping into your authentic genius and living the life that you desire, but also tapping into that collective wisdom of all these wonderful thought leaders out there, these life changers, these people that are helping other people change their lives, and tapping into that collective wisdom so that we can create what I call this generative collaboration. That space that we can all collaborate together to make this world a better place. I mean, for God's sakes, we got 8 billion people on the planet, and things are just going amok. And so we can create this opportunity where we can actually live in harmony. And that's not some delusional thing. What's delusional is that people are out there saying, oh yeah, you just have to think it and it's going to happen. No, I'm sorry. That's not true. What is true requires a lot of hard work. And fortunately, I have this ability and opportunity to do a lot of research. And one of my favorite sources, this is a source that I encourage everyone to go out to, and that's the Philosopher's Notes. A brilliant guy by the name of Brian Johnson, I think his name is. And he's reviewing all these incredible thought leaders. And I'm reading these amazing philosophers from 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, these brilliant thought leaders talking about things that are actually relevant for us today, relevant then and relevant to now, even now. And so our work to do, number one, is we have to be 100% responsible for our life. You know, this whole idea of being the victim. You know what? We are a victim. And I'll tell you what that victim is. We are a victim of misconception. The misconceptions about the truths of this world that somewhere along the line we acquired one way or another, and that really misguide us in our lives today and cause us to have all these weird thoughts, these weird beliefs, these weird values that really don't serve what I call the higher self. Now, that higher self is not some ethereal thing. That's really the best version of yourself, however you want to define that and however you want to connect with that. That best version of yourself. You know, if you believe in God or not, I think all of us, our true purpose in life really is to become that best version of ourselves so that we can contribute to what I call the source of everything. You know, we've come from that source. I mean, we're just a conglomeration of 70 trillion cells plus the 700 trillion cells of microorganisms, if you want to know the details. But all these atoms and molecules, they've come from somewhere, the source, whatever you want to call it. You know, we live in that intelligent universe. And we need to tap into that. It's having that awareness of who we are. You know, one of the things that struck me and got me on this path, this beautiful path of personal development, it's been a challenge too, where I have to face myself, look at myself in the mirror and says, really, is that you? Is that what you're doing? But I remember, you know, Tony Robbins, you know, in his voice, in his deep voice saying, you know, who are you? It's like, wow, what a thought. You know, who would ever think of asking that question? So that's our work to do. But I also recently came into the philosophy of Stoicism, the Stoics. You know, being stoic for most people means suffering in silence. Well, it's nothing to do that. You know, 2,000 years ago, some great philosophers, one of which was actually a slave in modern-day Turkey, who became a leader and created a school of Stoicism. Epictetus, that's his name. So part of the other work that we need to do, and this is my work that I'm always excited to remind myself when I forget, is to not be hurried. I learned something new again, is that this whole concept of hurrying is because there's a fear somewhere. You're fearful of something. So I have to digest that one and before I really talk about it. Because one thing that happens way too often, we'll talk a little bit about this later on, is that people who don't digest their thoughts that they've gotten from somewhere else, you know, the learnings, the information, the data points from someone else, you know, they vomit it out as if it's you know, the truth, but they haven't even digested it themselves. And so I'm not going to work on that one yet, but just to let you know, let's not be hurried. But the other part that we have to work on, and this is a word from the Navy SEALs, we've got to interdict the enemy. And the enemy in all of us are those destructive emotions. We've got to stop those because those destructive emotions, they really don't serve us. They really don't help us. So where do we begin? Well, first of all, our thoughts. Well, think about it. We have 70,000 thoughts every single day. And what's interesting is that more than 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts of the day before. So, you know, you have to, or you're going to want to appreciate that you're repeating yourself almost every single day. So what if you started changing some of those things? Because what you habitually think of, that becomes your destiny. And so if you're not liking where you are right now, then it's time to change your habitual thoughts so that you can change your destiny. So what's important about thinking? All right, first of all, who's in charge? Now, Jim Rohn says, stand guard at the door of your brain. Absolutely. And he's not the only one that said that. You are in charge of your thoughts. And that's a fundamental thing that I think a lot of us take for granted. We don't even think about it. You are in charge of your thoughts. And therefore, you're in charge of all your actions, your behavior. So you can only blame yourself. But that's the whole purpose of prescription for your transformation. As a doctor, I write prescriptions for people. And, we've gotten our prescriptions growing up, all the years that we've been living. But whose prescriptions? Are they our own? So the question is, whose thoughts are these really? There's a great metaphor that I learned from the philosopher's notes. And that is, if you go to a doctor, right, with all the stuff that's going on in our life today, right, and all our problems and everything else, and all this victimhood, not the one I was talking about, but the one that most of us fall into, 97% of the world at the effect, basically the victim of everything around them, okay? So what if somebody went to a doctor, and a head doctor, let's call him that, to help you with the stuff that you're upset about, that's bothering you, okay? And he says, great, thank you for sharing all that stuff. I'm just going to write the prescription for that other guy, for your neighbor. And that's what happens. Think about that for a moment. We're so easy and quick to blame other people about things, to blame them for our misfortune. But the true victim is we're victims of misconception. And what is the definition of a victim? Well, that's someone that's undergone harm because of something, not necessarily because of very specific intention or malintention. It could be an accident. Could actually be somebody who had great intentions. But if you're diabetic, right, and your best friend gives you a coffee and puts sugar in it because they love sugar, well, you're going to get harmed, but not by any specific malintention. And so we have to appreciate, where these thoughts come from. And these are the understandings of our world. So the other part that we have to think about is power, right? What is power? Whose power is it? What do we have power of? So some things we have control over, and some things we don't. And so we've got to ask ourselves, when we don't have control over something or someone, then it should not be of any concern to us. We've just got to accept this. So we are in charge, or we are empowered by our thoughts, our actions. But then again, who are we listening to? Really important. Who are we listening to? We've got the power to change. We've got the power for awareness. We've got the power to choose what we're thinking. We have the power to grow. We have the power to take care of ourselves, self-actualize. Because here's the thing. When it comes down to responsibility, and if we have an amazing power over something or someone, then it's our duty and responsibility to be smart about that. So what about ourselves? We've got to be smart about the power that we have over our own self so that we can become that best version of ourselves. And that's what I typically always come back to, that best version of ourselves. One of the phrases that really, struck me many years ago is hell on earth if I were ever to meet the man I was meant to be. It's like, wow, am I doing enough? And that's the power of questions. Asking better questions. Oftentimes in coaching, when I'm working with my clients, they're asking shitty questions. Why did I lose all this? Why did I fail in my relationship? Why did my business go down? Why can't I do this? Why can't I lose weight? Quality of life is the quality of questions. You ask better questions, you're going to get better answers. And so, again, anytime that you're disturbed, and I love this concept because we need to be aware of when we're disturbed. When we see something, right? Is it just our opinion? Is it the actual event? Or is it our opinion of something. So what makes it right? What makes it wrong? Again, misconception somewhere, perhaps. And I'm not saying that everything's a misconception, because they're not. They're misconceptions where they don't serve us. The Waitaha in North Island, New Zealand, the water bearers, oldest tribes in the world, do no harm, the Thorny Rule. Everything else is okay. It was a brilliant experience when I was in New Zealand, when I could just hear people just share their story of all their challenges and troubles. And then notice that everyone, including myself, for not a single second ever judge them, ever size them up for anything but they're telling their story and wanting to make a change. And then brilliantly seeing that change happen. It's a beautiful thing, because it's coming from that place of love. And that's our power. Our power is to love. And as I said before, how do we get there? You can't just say to somebody and give them lip service. Like, oh, just do this, or it's going to be fine, or just do that, or just love. We've got to understand what it is that we need to change. We've got to understand the nature of the world around us. There's a natural order of things. There's an intelligence in this world. And all we have to do is we have to appreciate that. Not have specific expectations. Okay, this must happen in this particular way. There's a natural order of things. And if we just simply take the time and breathe and recognize that, that's why meditation is so great. It's just allowing things to be. And so understanding that power that we have, being responsible for that, and affecting the world around us in the way that feels right, and making sure that we're doing the right thing. So getting to what's right and what's wrong. One of the incredible experiences that I had growing up is I grew up in 5 different countries and then learned 4 languages. And what a brilliant education I got, and I feel very fortunate. And that's a gift that I got. And that's another part that we can focus on. Whatever gifts that we have, it's our responsibility to share those things. People talk about the hero's journey. And I think somebody get, seduced by the idea, I'm now a hero. But you're not really on that hero's journey until you share with the rest of the world the learnings that you've gotten over time. You can call it your duty if you want, or your responsibility if you want. But the truth is that so many people have given you gifts over time that maybe you never return specifically to them. Why not do it with what you've learned? And so what's right and wrong for me growing up was interesting, because I went to completely different countries, and seeing what was right in one country was completely wrong in the other. Which was cool and awesome in one place was just awful in another. And then learning all these different languages, just really realizing appreciation of the nuances of life. So right and wrong, by whose definition? What's that purpose of what's right and wrong? How does that serve you? How does that restrict you? Do you have that what's called a fixed mentality where things just have to be a certain way? But that leads to a lot of unhappiness when things have to be a certain way. I was just talking to Robin before the show. More happiness comes from choices. Happy people have more choices. It's about understanding that when you can be more flexible, that means you have more choices. Flexibility of mind. Flexibility of perception, flexibility of focus, flexibility and learning from other people. And that's the one thing that we forget, is that do we stick with just the immediate environment around us that's going to teach us? Or are we going to go outside of the environment and start looking? I can't tell you how many times I was criticized for being that eternal searcher. I love the fact that I'm searching. I'm always searching for better answers. At one point, people thought, that's, you're always searching. That means you're not happy. No. It's because there's a greater meaning in things. It's easy to try to prove something specifically when you just have a narrow focus. The scientific, process or procedure is not so much to prove something, but to prove something wrong. So it's not like, okay, I'm just going to say all swans are white. And if you've ever seen a not white swan, then you know what I'm talking about. Because not all swans are white. So what's a better and more relevant scientific truth is to say not all swans are white. And so understanding that if we just shine a light on a very restricted area of life, that's all we're going to know. It was interesting when you talk about the history of South America and the Spaniards coming to South America, when the conquistadores came, and with their big, galleon ships, and the Indians couldn't see them because they weren't familiar with that. See, important part of awareness is we can't be aware of something that we're not aware of. We can't see something that we can't see ourselves. It's just that blind spot within us. And the same is true, is that if you want to compliment somebody, you can't see the greatness in somebody else unless you can see it in yourself. And that's my focus with my clients. See what's great inside of you so you can see what's great in everyone else. What I'm really wanting to say is when you're critical of other people, when you complain about other people, when you blame other people, what's that work for you to do? What is it inside of yourself, inside of you, that you need to look at and work on? And that's one of the fundamental truths that we all need to work on. Because as we work on those things that we're most critical of others, we're going to find so much more harmony as we can dance to the music of the life around us, being okay with whatever shows up. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in a few moments. Because when we're disturbed, then violence has a way of showing up. So by whose definition is right and wrong? And what happens when it's not? Is it your fault? Is it your parents' fault? Were they wrong? So in the immortal worlds of Reagan, trust but verify. So you can trust things, or not necessarily trust things, but we've got to verify. We've got to get to the bottom of the truth. There's nothing better than finding the truth. One of our 6 human needs is certainty. Besides love and connection, significance, and variety, as well as growth and contribution, which are probably my highest ones. So my highest ones are growth and love and connection. And so what's important here is that we desire, we need certainty. As human beings, we need that certainty. And that's where truth comes in. Why only get half the truth? Why only share half the truth? Sharing half the truth is just actually a lie. Because when you lie to somebody, when you give somebody else half the truth, when you know it's only half the truth, and it's happening in our world all the time. Just look at what's happening in the every news cycle. There's a reason, for all the lies. There's a purpose. It makes sense. But is it right? So what's important for all of us to realize is that if you require or demand other people to behave in the way that you see fit, that's being selfish. However, when you live your life the way that you see fit, and you can find that alignment with your beliefs and your values, your spiritual connection, the divine, whatever that is for you, then you're living a life of a master. Someone who has the courage to own themselves and not be at the mercy and the power of other people. The problem is that you might get ridiculed. And a lot of people get ridiculed. And a lot of people get shut out. And oftentimes that's why we don't necessarily behave the way that we behave. In my world as a doctor, the things that I do gets a lot of arrows in my back. But I staunchly believe in the things that I do because I have a purpose in life. And my purpose is to help others or inspire others to dream again. And what does that mean? When we can get rid of the stuff that prevents us from dreaming, then I've accomplished my goal. It's what I meant to say earlier about love. You know, and the whole lip service thing. Oh, you just got to love, right? No. You got to remove whatever is stopping us from loving, from being love, instead of doing love, instead of doing things. We're not doing beings, we're human beings. We're the best virtue. You know, virtues are all that is good within us. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. That's the only thing that really counts. And that's from the philosophy of Stoicism. Is that the only virtues are the only thing that is good. What are virtues? Well, that's loyalty, that's honor, that's honesty. So, right and wrong, who's teaching us? And understanding one very critical voice is telling you, so I'm back there, not the devil and the angel on your shoulders. It's that voice inside of you that says, hey, you know what? You got to do this. The one voice that I'm sharing these days of what I should have been doing is, you know, doing a lot more reading. You know, for the last 18 years, I've been telling myself, go read, got to read, got to read, got to read, got to read. And then I do these little spurts of reading. And now I'm just a voracious reader. And fortunately, with the philosopher's notes, I can be a lot more efficient. I can cover a lot more books in one day because this Brian fellow has done a wonderful job at summarizing them. And it's a great insight because, you know, when you don't have a lot of time, because, you know, oftentimes when you read these books, there's way too much information. You know, I'm that guy that always wants to stay in flow. I got a lot going on, maybe too much, as my wife will probably complain about, which she does, and rightly so. You know, there's never enough time for all of it. I really need about 40 hours every single day to accomplish what it is that I want to accomplish. But I can't get anybody else to do it. It's what I've got to do. And so the point here that I'm sharing with you is that we've got to appreciate the work that we can do. So Stoicism, from leading philosophers at the time, was a slave from Turkey. Was at 55 AD, Epictetus, and then a Roman emperor of all people, polar opposites, right? Marcus Aurelius. And so the definition there, as I alluded to earlier, is not, you know, silent suffering, but it's endurance of pain without a complaint. So what does that really mean? Virtue is the highest good. It's based on our knowledge, and it's the wise use to live in harmony within the divine reason. Let me say that again. The wise live in harmony, the people that are Stoics, with the divine reason. And what is that divine reason? Well, that's the natural order of life. We can't argue with that. I mean, this is an intelligent universe. We can't argue with what makes sense. Now, we have a lot of social constructs in our search and desire for power that totally messes it up. And so we don't get to see the essence of the natural order. And so the other part that's important to appreciate, that outside of the virtue, which is our highest good, those qualities, the characteristics of beingness that we get to own, that we get to control, that we can share with the world. So everything outside of us, right, that's neither good or bad. It's just the meaning that we choose to give it. They have value, like health and wealth, that our virtues can go for. So again, all of this is really a prelude, developing into what's happening today with all the violence. Because people are not relying on themselves. They're relying on the external world to give them whatever it is that they think they should get. They're not being 100% responsible for themselves. They're not being at the effect. They're not being at cause. They're being at the effect of the world around them and getting upset. There was interesting. There's a study, I think it was at Harvard, where they decided to average the exam results. And so what was happening is they divided in three. So they had the top students who always got the A's, 100%. And then you had the middle group that just got average. And then you had the ones that failed. And so what they did is they averaged everything out. So everybody pretty much got the same result. And what was interesting was that the people that just got the average results, they're okay because their result wasn't changing. But the ones that were failing or had lower results, they were happy because now their grade was going to go up. And obviously the people with the high grades, they were upset. What happened after a while is that the people who generally got the high grades, they decided, I'm not going to work anymore. Why? I'm not going to be rewarded for my hard work. And what was interesting is the lower group, they were getting upset. Well, you guys aren't doing the work anymore. We have to rely on ourselves. It's important for us that we work on our personal growth and that we become self-actualized, that we're not relying on the external world, that we understand that life is unpredictable, right? It is. And that we have to remain steadfast and strong and be in control. It's up to us. So this whole concept of Stoicism was also practiced by George Washington's, our founding fathers, some amazing individuals, because it makes sense. So if you get a chance, look it up. Look at Wikipedia. It has a pretty cool description of Stoicism. So here are some of the questions that we can begin to ask ourselves. Why do people criticize? Why do people criticize you? What are the questions that you're asking yourself constantly? What's that emotional place? What's your primary emotion? What are your thoughts? What are your habitual thoughts? If something bothers you, what are you doing about that? Are you being ridiculed? Are you being shamed? What does that really mean? Being shamed, being ridiculed. Somebody criticizing you, and guess what? It's their work to do. It's sort of like, somebody complains about me. He says, wow, is that all you're complaining about? You should hear about the rest. Thank God it's just that. You are you. You are responsible for you. And if they have something to be upset about you, guess what? That's their work to do. And if it bothers you that you're doing whatever it is that you're doing or thinking, well, that's then your work to do as well. It's what I talked about last time. Where are we defended? How are we defending ourselves? Who's stopping you? Who's preventing you from moving forward? What are you scared of losing? Do you have a dream? What is that dream? Do you like your life? If you don't like your life, what are you doing about it? And I recently watched Mr. Rogers. And I'm one of those people who looked at the show as an adult. I didn't see him as a kid. And thought to myself, wow, this is a really stupid show. The guy was brilliant. Beautiful soul. Probably hasn't gotten all the credit that he absolutely deserves. But one of the empowering things in this wonderful documentary about him is when people saw how much influence he had. And they asked him, you realize the power that you have? And he says, I never see it that way. I'm here to help children appreciate the world around them. And that's part of my purpose. But guess what? We're all children. So I'm talking to all of us. But what it is that we need to start learning so that we can become better masters of our own fate, our own feelings, our own emotion, our own thoughts, our own actions. And not having a crazy response to stuff and get even in a bigger pickle. And not blaming other people for the fact that you're not living the life that you desired. I think it was Jack Canfield who said this. You know, if you're criticizing, if you're looking at the external world, blaming the external world because you haven't created a life that you really want, that's just a waste of time. You can't do that. You don't like your life? Well, guess what? All the decisions up to this moment are yours. Change it. If you don't like other people's lives, it's not up to you to change theirs. It's up to you to have a deeper truth of everything that's going on. And when we fail that, what happens? Anger. And what is that? It's a fear of our well-being. The world is not meeting our expectations. People are not behaving as we see fit. This is selfish. It's selfish to expect others to behave the way that you feel is appropriate. Besides that, have you looked into the real truth? Fear of being threatened, fear of annihilation. What's interesting, it really comes down to this fight or flight response. And in situations like that, when these misconceptions are so persuasive, because you haven't taken the time to verify that. And that's what happens to all of us. Look, I'm very well educated. I went to 17 years of medical training, for God's sakes. They speak 4 languages. They lived in 5 different countries. And I'm still a victim of misconception. And the best thing that I can get in my own relationship is that I get challenged. It's like, wow, okay, I'm pretty upset right now. Awesome. Because that's a trigger for me to just take a deep breath, not react, and figure out what's my work to do. Because the fight and flight response is a wired set of physiological responses that we developed thousands of years ago. It was relevant when we saw a saber-toothed tiger in front of us, and we either had to fight against it, or run away from it. When was the last time you saw a saber-toothed tiger? Or when was the last time that your life was actually physically threatened? And so the problem that we have then is that we get all these hormones, flooding your system. And the benefit of fighting and fleeing is that you used up those hormones, those toxins. But now those toxins accumulate. I can tell you from personal experience. And me being the sensitive guy, when I get angry, boy, I can get angry. I maintain it and control it, but my body feels it. And it feels it for 24, 48 hours. And guess what? I'm not the only one. It's a well-known physiological fact. You know, when you do something loving, when you see somebody do something loving and kindness, wow, that just flushes your immune system and helps it. So that's why people say you need 12 hugs every single day, because that really helps your immune system. When you get angry, it's a problem for 24 or 48 hours. So what is it that we need to ask? What is it that we're not seeing in this place of anger? You know, what is it that we're not working on for ourselves? In judgment, we can't see the truth, or we can't see the greatness. So if we're being blind, and if we're judging, which is also another way of socially acceptable, well, not necessarily acceptable, but a wired blind response, you're fooling yourself, by the way. And that's when we have to be mindful when we hear other people say all sorts of things. You know, we've got to question. We've got to question everything. You know, what's the purpose of this anger? You know, what's the purpose of the behavior that is consequent to this anger? And so then asking ourselves, you know, what is it that we want? But what's also an alternative? Can we ask for forgiveness? You know, recently there was just a horrific murder of a young kid. And all the mother could say, you know what? I forgive that person. I feel sorry for that person. Wow. What strength, what courage. Where's that lesson for us? So what is violence? Anything that does harm to another. Why resort to violence? Well, it's just people being passionate about something. I'm checking my screen to make sure I don't violently hit it because it's not working. So it's about passion about something. But whose passion is it? Is it yours or is it someone else's? People who resort to violence, and violence is by definition anything that does harm to anyone else. Verbal violence, stealing, lying is violent. Passive aggressiveness, that's also violent. Different forms of violence, but they're all violence. And you know what it is? It comes down to one simple thing. We're not doing the work. It's the resort, I would say, of the incompetent or incomplete thinking. It's the absence of rational thought. It's the absence of verifying the truth. It's the absence of wanting to know what that truth is. So why does it happen? Well, people are seduced by a future that's not seemingly to their liking. They're seduced by this because of those misconceptions, because what other people are telling them. But also for other reasons. You know, there's personal gain. Think about it that way. People get violent for personal gain. People get violent because then they're part of a group. They need significance. They need a connection. But these aren't reasons to be violent. These are lies to yourself. This is I don't want to call it a disgrace to self, but you're not being fair to yourself. Because when you become wiser, then you realize, wow, why did I ever do those things? Be wise now. Don't resort to that. We need to belong. And there's two other reasons for violence. You know, one of them, people are just troubled. They're just not aware. They're not aware of what it is that they're actually doing. And they might even enjoy it. Now, that's a sick thought, but, you know, it happens. So violence makes sense in so many different levels. Not right, not wrong. But we have to ask ourselves, if we're getting into that place of anger, and then subsequent to that into violence, what's our responsibility? What is our characterization of ourselves to the world around us? What are we telling the world around us about ourselves? Being intolerant in a way is violence. It is. And the people that are espousing so much as to how things need to be are the ones least, doing it themselves, forcing upon other people to behave in a certain way, and they don't even behave themselves. And so I get it. I'm not criticizing them. I just know that it's not serving their higher purpose. And they've got work to do. I've got work to do. We've all got work to do. And we've got to stop making other people responsible for the way that we feel, for what our lot in life is. Because as soon as we stop making other people responsible for where we are in life, we're not going to be fighting them. We must begin to accept life as it is, not as we expect it. Not get upset that life isn't happening as we expected. Be excited that life is happening as the way it is. Because if anything, that's that opportunity for growth, to learn to become the best version of yourself. I can't tell you how often, I'm confronted with a disturbance, in my relationship. Take that as an example. And rather than making my partner wrong, taking that breath and taking that moment and saying, you know what? What's my work to do? Now, am I successful? Absolutely not. And that's my work to do, like it is for all of us. Taking responsibility for whatever it is that I'm doing, thinking, feeling. And it's in my power, and that's why I talked about power in the beginning. It's in my power to change. I've got this responsibility to use that power well, so that I'm that best version of myself. But when it comes down to our world today, which is really, the original title of the show, is that there's a strategy behind all this violence. It's let's win at all costs. Winning is just justified. Anything goes. Use lies. Play the blame game. All these things. It happens all the time. Blame the weather. Blame the economy. My business failed because of the weather. Or my business failed because the economy went down. But then again, there are people that are going to say my business failed because the economy went up. Where is that opportunity for us to grow, to be flexible, to expand, become more? Because as I said before, we all desire divine happiness. And to be that, we have to resolve whatever makes us unhappy. It's work. It's hard work. It's scary at times. It takes courage. For the last 20 years, I was kind of lazy. I didn't want to do the reading. Now, finally, I'm doing the reading. And I'm excited because I get to share that with you. So it's about having that reality check. What's real? And again, with the massive influx of information on the radio, on the TV, internet, and the vast opportunities for information to be manipulated. Too often we're so quick to judge something or someone without having all the information. How could you? If you really want to think about it, how would you feel if somebody called you names? I'm sure people do call you names. And you think, hey, that's not fair. That's not me. I'm not that person. It hurts. It hurts when somebody labels you and calls you a name. You know, why not just have a conversation? Okay, let's talk about the truth here. And here's the other one. When you grudge someone, when you have a grudge, or when you begrudge someone, you have a grudge against someone else, there's this fallacy to think that as long as I have this grudge against someone else, it's going to ease the pain, that person's going to change. Nonsense. It's no different than you eating rat poison and expecting the rat to die. It's not going to happen. That's your work to do. So our path to happiness is accepting this moment. Not get stuck in the past or seduced by the future. But noticing this moment. Not ignoring and being deluded about everything's going to be fine. No, it's not. You got work to do. You've got to understand the true nature of things. We must first understand what it is that we need to change. There is a natural order. And if we listen to our inner voice, we're going to hear it. You will. It makes no sense to deny it. And learn to accept that you're wrong about things. And learn when you are right. Learn to trust that intuition. But what's the work that you're doing to come to those conclusions? To come to the truth, to come to the reality. Because as long as you're taking on somebody else's words, they're not yours. And they're fake. As long as you're not living in alignment with your true purpose, and let me be more clear on that. You can't have a purpose at the expense of others. That's not harmony. That's not balance. That's not right. Because you wouldn't want people to do that to you. So part of what we need to do is get rid of the destructive emotions, because that just wreaks havoc in everything. We can't be relying on other people's words, and keep on asking the questions. What else? What else is there to see? What is it that I'm missing? What is it that I don't see? So become the best version of ourselves. Stop blaming. Stop making false accusations. Stop name calling. Stop vomiting ideas and thoughts that you haven't even digested. There's this metaphor, for sheep. The sheep isn't going to eat the grass and vomit it all over so the shepherd could see how well they did. No. They're going to digest it so they've got a good quilt that the shepherd can harvest. Let's do the same. Stop repeating at people's words. Find your own truth. What's your prescription? Not your neighbor's. Get your prescription for you. Stop looking outside of yourself for the answers why you haven't created the life you want. Get the help, get the coaching, listen to podcasts like this, and be that hunter of truth. It's a lot of fun to find the truth of yourself, who you are, who you can become, who you are becoming, and the influence that you can have on the world around you. Because that's the best gift of all. It's how you can impact others. Your children, your family, and the rest of the world. And I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, prescription for your transformation. Real people, real conversations, and real success. Tapping into your authentic genius, living the life that you desire, and also tapping into that collective wisdom so that we can create that space for generative collaboration. Thank you so much, and I'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to Dr. Rademaker's Prescription for Transformation. Join Dr. Bart Rademaker live right here on Radio Star Worldwide each week. or on demand 24/7.